Now I'm recording. Thank you. So when we talk about the term elements or dhatus, then this holds the meaning of the cause, a potential, or a seed. And each of these highlight a certain aspect of what the elements refer to. So it's a cause because the elements are actually the cause for the arising of something. They're the potential in terms of its essence. They hold the potential for such arising, and that therefore they can. They're also referred to as potential or class, and they're also referred to as seeds in terms of the fact that just like a seed is able to give rise to a fruit afterwards, the elements are also that which is the seed for something to arise.
The chua kaga ni de kare chi de la yobel chiksung ro na.
That's good. Kamachik. Shenda chik de ngazo namshi gege kola keche shedu nam de namshi chik ge namba mindawa chigi orabe yana bete mindawa namshi mindawa ge chigi ore yana de namshi chik gu chiki chele mindawa chigi orabe kan das go walengore.
Las. The chi kandrasana namshe chigrang ring madang chola sem chigrang yore sem chig de tene migi wangbo la tenne rubika la tene migi shepa dang dana shi wangbo rang la tembi kapela te gi shepas or tenesne lavares.
So the second question that we had was with regard to the 8 types of consciousness. Is this referring to one single consciousness or one mind stream, or with different functions and different aspects, like classifying it in different ways based on different functions, or are there actually 8 separate consciousnesses? And the answer is it's actually one mind stream. It's one mind, it's one consciousness, but depending on the function that it fulfills and the way that it arises, we're classifying these, we have this classification into 8 types of consciousness. So that would then refer to the I consciousness is that which is classified as the cognition that arises based on that perceives a visible form through the ruling condition of the I faculty. So we're classifying them based on that, but there's only one mind. The kashi gyumeba dabo tongidus pena oma the paju kirimo ne oma tunya dang
Katimbasu tukjiche re ji di gyumeba mare gyu karesana gyu tingin zin la tenne gyu tingin zin ge toble wangjorwa semla wangjorwe la tenne ane tinesne chungjores ta di gyu yang yores tingin zin tenzo tang antendo sha chogres.
And then another question was with regard to seemingly causeless phenomena. So the question is, what about seemingly causeless phenomena such as the drawn cow that can give milk, or the shrinking of the body of Milarepa into the size of the horn without the body getting smaller and the horn getting bigger. Are these phenomena described to have certain causes and conditions as well, or do they fall into the category of what is beyond the range of explanation by the mind and therefore cannot be grasped accordingly? Actually, these kinds of phenomena also have causes. They're not causeless at all, but the cause for these kinds of phenomena is actually meditative absorption and having gained mastery over the mind. So it's the mastery and the meditative absorption which is the cause for that, for these kinds of phenomena to arise. So they're not causeless.
So, 네, 가상 베나 감 좁게스는 좋아래다. 감 좁게 대 가인스나 다 왕보 갑라 메기 왕보라래. 단다 감 갑라 감라 보라. 메기 감네 얘기 감바돌라 쭉 아니 속이 감네 최기 감바돌라 쭉쭉쭉니 주니지 안데 땡돌라 메기 넘버 쉐바네 얘기 넘버 쉐바 메기 넘버 쉐비 감네 얘기 넘버 쉐비 감제 버도 죽숨 좁게스 감 좁게스나 다틴데 레스 안데 감 좁게제 낭라 데 감 좁게데 낭네 따도도양 감 좁게게 낭네 데네 베나 최기 감생저라 베나 소자 지로 렉자 최슨 최기 감데라에나 몸바 저다도 지나 초감 안에 든 안에 몸바 군도 따도 지나 초감 주룩스 어딘데스네 감데 좁게 감 좁게 낭네 장 최기 감데라 안에 에나 데네 몸바 저다 몸바 군두스나 어딘데스네 든당 안에 주룩스 어딘데스 침바레스.
So yesterday we enumerated the 18 elements, and we said that they're the sense faculty elements, the sense object elements, and the sense consciousness elements. And so when we have these elements, then here what we have seen previously as the faculties, for example, the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, and so on, is here then referred to the elements. So we have the eye element, the ear element, the nose element, the tongue element, the body element, and the mind element. And then we also have the respective objects, which are also 6, so the visual form, sound, smell, taste, texture, and mental objects, and then the 6 types of consciousness. So we have 18 elements, which are 3 sets of 3 sets of 6. The senses, the object, and the consciousnesses. And specifically, we talked about the mental objects yesterday, where we found a difference between the presentation in the Abhidhamma Kosha and in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya. We said that the Abhidhamma Kosha enumerates 5 types of forms as these mental objects, the object element of the mind element, of the mind consciousness. So the Abhidhamma Kosha was enumerating 7 different kinds of mental objects, while the Abhidhamma Samuccaya enumerated 16 different mental objects.
대달 미기 감당 수기 감당 미셰기 감네 이셰기 바르 족생 숨데 좁게 보텔레스 다운단다 야강도 쉬와 온데 깨쳐되제 다 텔레스 엔테네 다 된조라 캄스는 람나 간데스는 라브레 디콜라 케치 숭게도 맥네 얘기 바르 주보 율라 짐바레 체베 유암 릭삼 아네 사변기 된당사 어떤데 제발라 때문에 캄레스는 숭아레 믹 베나 미기 캄되게 가르치기도 쓰나 율라 짐바르치비 교치기도 쓰나 베나 율속 자우데라 베나 율속라 미기 율도 겨베 속데라 짐바르치바 교치기도 딜라테네 테네 율라 짐바르치비 디우디 케게라 디 교도 치베나 코밍라 캄스 라바레스 미기데라 미기 옹보데라 테네 캄갑라 미기 캄스네 라코에데 가인스나 율데라 짐바르치바 짐바르치바 계제 다우치 지기도스 아네 릭암 다 그런게 맥데게 율라 짐바르치베게 릭삼 티네 그런게 모다우지로와 텐데스네 첼레 다우치 텐데 체와라 텐네 안 릭삼스 얘는 사분 다wan 차기도 사 맥데기 율라 짐바르치베 사분 지기도 사 사분스네 계제 개발 저 개발 제가 뉴바다우치라와 뉴바다우치 제베스 맥데기 율 짐바르치베 뉴바 제베나 사분스네 라와인스원데 다텐다 디데 메기 캄네 예기 캄바도 주보데라 다 메기 캄이나 율라 짐바르체베 유삼 릭 사분 다나셰 나이나양 아니 율자 짐바르체발라 유삼 릭산 사분 다나셰 옹보 갑라다 옹보 라라 캄 갑라 캄 라랑 소소게 되네 율캄 라랑 소소데 유함 릭삼 사분 아니 텐데 체발라 텐네 텐조 나보되게 주보되게 민라양 캄 나바레스 대신도 속내 최지 버도 주보 송와 당상 송와니도 줘도 속대 메게 셰바당 메게 옹보게 송와니도 메게 옹보게 송와니도 줘도 송와니도 줘버치비 규체기도 송와니도게 되네 릭삼 릭 되네 체기도 되네 계제 개월 제와 다우지 사변 뉴바 다우지 지기도 산디임발테네 속대되니 캄레스 다나신 속자티로 렉자 탐제라 라랑 소속에 안에 계제 안에 라랑 소속에 안에 뉴바 라랑 소속에 되네 그런 게 릭다우지라 그런 게 젤레다우지 텐데 제와라 때네 텐데 좀이나 캄나바 인성네 당는 신치고 지경레 디 믹셰네 이셰기 버도 주보 된조양 율무소 짐비 규함스나 미기 셰바데기 율숙 분바다우데 무소 짐버체베기 규체기도 스코게 계제 체기도스나 딜라테네 콜라 안데라인 캄나바인스 당난신 릭 젤레 다우지 다든데 메기 셰바데기 아니 율무에서 심바르게 젤레 내가 다우 체게 유면된 릭삼 되네 뉴바 사분담 뉴바 다우지 두스 메기 셰바데라 율수 분바즈면라 사분 뉴바 다우지 두데임 발테네 컴스 사빈 된데에선 유함 릭삼 사빈기 된다우지라 아니 컴셰 라미에선 유함 릭단 사빈기 된젠노
Continuing now from where we have left off yesterday, we're on the bottom of page 37, which is paragraph 2.13. The 3 times 6 elements, from the I element, visible form element, and the I consciousness element to the mind consciousness element, altogether total 18. That's what we have just seen. So we're taking all these different elements, starting from the form, from the I elements, or the I faculty, which is the I element, to the visible form element, which is the object, and then the I consciousness, which is the I consciousness element. Then continuing to the ear element, the sound element, and the ear consciousness element, and so on, all the way until we reach the 18th element, which is the mind consciousness element. So that makes the 18 altogether. Amongst these, the 6 elements from I to mind have the function of being causes, potentials, or seeds for apprehending an object. So now we're looking at what this element, this term elements actually refers to, and how these 18 elements function as an element, as the dhatu, and how that can be understood as being the cause, potential, or seed for apprehending an object. So here first we look at the faculty elements, so the visual, the eye element, the ear element, and so on. So the eye element, for example, is the eye faculty, and it has the function to cause an eye consciousness, the cognition of a visible object, the apprehension of a visible object. So therefore it is the cause which makes one apprehend, or which causes the apprehension of a form, of a visible form. And since it has this it functions as being that cause, it's the source for the cognition of visible form to arise, and therefore it also functions as the potential for, so when there's the I element, the I faculty, that functions also, that's also the potential for form perceiving cognition to arise. Therefore it's also a potential, and it is a seed because it gives rise to, it has this potential to give rise to a result, the cognition. And so in that sense, the I consciousness is that, the I faculty is that which is functions as the cause, potential, or seed for the apprehension of a particular visible object. And likewise, then all the different sense objects, the sense faculty elements, they function likewise. So the I faculty is the cause or the potential or the seed for the cognition of visible objects to arise. And therefore it's the I element, and then the ear faculty, or the ear element, is that which is the seed, the cause, the seed, or the potential for the cognition of sound to arise. It's that which causes the apprehension of sound, and so on with all the senses. And that's, in that way, the faculties are what are the causes for the causes, potentials, or seeds for the cognitions to arise. Then we come to the 6 elements. Likewise, the 6 elements from visible form to mental object have the function of being causes, potentials, or seeds for the apprehended object. So the objects themselves, they're also causes, they also are causes for an apprehension of that object to arise. When there are these objects, then the related cognitions can arise. So the visible form, which is the object to be apprehended, is the element in the sense that it is the cause or the potential or the seed for an form perceiving cognition to arise. Without the object, there would be no cognition. So there again, we see that the objects, the sense objects and the mental objects, they function as causes, potentials, or seeds for a cognition to arise of the respective objects. And the 6 elements from eye consciousness to mind consciousness have the function of being causes, potentials, or seeds for actual apprehension of an object. So the consciousnesses are also elements because without the sense consciousnesses and the mind consciousness, so all the eye consciousness element, the ear consciousness element, the nose consciousness, tongue consciousness element, the body consciousness element, and the mind consciousness element, without those, no cognition would arise either of the objects. So they also function as the cause for the cognition to arise as a potential or a seed of that consciousness, of a particular cognition, a particular instant of apprehension of the object to arise. And so therefore all of these 18, 3 times 6 elements, function as causes, potentials, and seeds. These are ways to look at them, and therefore they're the 18 elements. Thus, element dhatu means being a cause, a potential, or a seed. So, for example, the eye consciousness also is the cause for the apprehension of its particular object. So it functions as the cause for the perception, for the apprehension of a vase, for example. So it makes the apprehension arise.
네, 신양 다든데 감기 꼴라양 기우 감 죽바 라베지 셰바지 요레스 송안에 감 기우 감 죽스네 지에 요레스 딜라 감 죽데 사추 아니 메롱 남카 디땡나 남셰샹나 기우 감 죽바스네 라바레스 송안에 딜라 사 단다페나 사데 아니 샤 추데 차 메데 수부기 죄데 룽데 수부기 옥데 네 남카데 수분 낭라 동차요가 된조 베네 남셰 등랑솔라 넘버 셰바이 촉촉지 요데라 오데네스네 기우 캄투파스네 지에저레스 디데 캄투디데 인손 숭바테 류지 중화시 당스네 단지 슈반난신레 류지 중화시 사초메 롱데 류지 중화시 당 아니 남기 부가 동비 차된조데 인송아래 남셰게 감데 아니 대천비 천비 감지 명기 답이 에와 현단장 된지 감줍제도 마디오메도 시안도 능라 감 단다대로 기우 감 두고 라와나신 진행 감 생되는 계좌 망고 용기 사례 된조 너도나 양 감줍제 능라 뒤대열에 선송안에 단다 감줍제 능라 뒤뒤배나 감줍제 능라 뒤뒤배나 단다 기우 감 두배게 단다 최된조 이제 감주박에 단다 사 추매룽 된조대 베나 감 강이디나라 두비레스 다 다나신 남가데 아니 감 강이디나라 두비레 남셰데 감 강이디나라 두비레스 다데스 계절리기로와 근데 인도 넘버 쉐바데 단나가죠 남셰 촉 둑스네 감주요와 단다 kham chukna la nam shi ye kham sing de ta tin na chuk res ane de buga ngarang zo khan subu nang la tongcha yo gen kham chukwa gen nam kha shewa de tongcha de subu gi tongcha den zo an tanda chö kham nang la chö gi kham nang la tanda dumaje sum ro zi di gala dumaje nang la nam kha sing jo ba onde nang la chuk res song ale de ta tanda de sa chu me lung de ane 다 rekcha nang la tugi res ne sunga re rekcha nang la wa ane ti indu denzo tamje kyang tene kham chokya nang la madu ba me tos.
Furthermore, the 6 elements of a person are taught to be the 6 elements of earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness. They are the 4 elements of the body and the vacuity of the inner vessels as the space element in addition to the consciousness element. So actually, we also find other presentations of the elements, like other enumerations of elements in different texts and teachings. We hear the term elements in different contexts. And one of them is when we speak about the 6 elements of a person, which would be then earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness. Earth referring to the flesh of the body, then water being mainly the blood and the fluids. Then fire would be the warmth of the body, and wind the breath. Then the empty spaces, the cavities that are filled with, that are empty, would then refer to space. And then the consciousness element refers to the 6 kinds of consciousness, the 6 collections of consciousness that we have seen before. So this indicates here that there are different presentations that we find in the sutras and other texts. We find different things labeled as elements. And here it says, as indicated by these 6 elements, other divisions with the name elements are also essentially all included within the above 18 elements. So it is all the different kinds of presentations of elements, the different lists that might be enumerated, they all are included in the 18 elements, actually. They're not something completely different than the 18 elements. They're all included in that comprehensive list of 18. So where do then these 6 elements of a person fit in? Like how are they enumerated already in the 18 elements? We first look at the consciousness element of the person. That refers to the 6 elements of consciousness that we have seen. So the sense consciousness element and the mind consciousness element. The space element is what we have seen as mental object and the uncompounded phenomena space. That's the space element specifically. So the uncompounded phenomena of space, which is an element, the mental object. And it just refers to this empty aspect, like the absence of anything obstructive. And then the 4 great elements, so the earth, water, fire, and wind, they're included within the elements, within the tangible objects within the body element, the texture element, so there that which can be touched. So in this way, all of the 6 elements of a person, they're already included in the list of the 18 elements.
감지 라비에 라 감쪽게 레스 단다 제단 야강라 왕 단다 감지 라비에 라 감쪽게 데라 데네 랍도 예와도 예와 지나 아니 도도양 감쪽게 탐바 요세 된조 라비에 라양 야 쪽게 탐바 지에 요스마레 감쪽게 보데라 데네 당보 수진도 또바당 수진 마인바 감쪽제부 나네 당보데 수진 임바데 가져 요래 수진 마인바데 가져 요래스네 다 된게 이제 대생 당보지 다들 좁게 요라서 좁게 나네 당보데 감쪽제부 나네 수수롱와 단다 수기 풍부나라 수수롱와 인켄데 가져 요래 아니 수진 마인바데 가져 요래스 다 된게 된다시 lep티캅라 딜라 수진도 똑바 왕봉아 된가이 감주당 아니 최감기 난라 촉직스 최감 용종 말에 최감 촉직대 수진도 똑바인스 다 디마인바신벨 항만남 수진 민바오스 데네 수진도 똑바스 수진도 수수롱와 단당도 야강라 고담보 수기 풍부갑라 수수롱와 수기 칭년슬라임 온데 수수 데 수진도 똑바데스 아네 다딘도 똑바데 감 좁게는 가인간데르스나 베나 스나 왕봉아다 되는가데레스 수진게 감주데 단다 왕보갑라 디밍라 왕봉아 라라다 감갑라 감나 왕복이 감나 단다 따된 수다티를 된조라야다 감감스네 자르고라 된조 되는가데 아니 속속마이스 가인스나 된조데 돌차라 망보 도발레 때네 수 쇠샤와기 아텐데게 힘벨레 때네 아니 속속마 젠기스 주치 다 감쪽게 năng 속속 도와데 왕복나 되는가 진이 주치 아니 데 땡도라 최감기 촉직 다 최감데라 난 가상 다 이제 뭔가 저다나 최감데단다 듄니스 아니 단다 지기다나 가르스난데 뭔가 군두다나 최감데라 에와 주룩인스 숭숭 어디낭네 최감데낭네 바트나 뭔가 저다나 넘버 직접 마인 비숙 라인조와데 최감나나 온딘데양 수진도 똑바레스 송안에 초감기 촉직스는데 뭔가 저기 따나 초감기 촉직스나 간데르선 넘버리지 마인 비속데레스 드네 뭔가 군두 따나 최기 깨체 바이 숙선 최기 깨체 바이 숙 나선 지에저와 온디데 나디데 소스로 맞은기 감데 딘데인스 드네 학마 수진 멤버오 학마 수진 민스나다 남시에게 감둔데 남시에게 감둔당 아니 초감낭라 단계대 넘버리지 마인베 소대단 최기계 제베 소대 파트너샤나 아니 학마 다 두마젠당 대신이당 다 강다량 두마제 가시지 여러와 오 덴조대 덴조당 되네 도도양 초리 풍보 두시기 풍보 아니 두제기 풍보 쓰는 덴제 수마 여러한테 초감낭라 요와 오 덴데스는 오 덴조 탐제대 되네 속진 마인바인스 다디낭라 가르스나 초리 풍보 두시기 풍보 다 두제기 풍보 갑라 시디가라 가상네 망보지 시라 두제기 풍보 데라 에나데네 총된나 집에 두제 심중압중 나치스 총된 마인바 안에 데멘 두제 니슈접시 라소바 계제몽시로 덴조 탐제데다 수제 마인바 이캄데레 송안에다 다 초감지 촉직대 송디갑데라 뭔가 저다나 넘버리지 마인베 소데당 뭔가 군두다나 최기 계제 바이수 송디니데 다 수진도샤 ande di mai ba lakma chokam nang yo chu thamje dang lakma shimba sukje me ba namshe ki kam dun yero namshe me ki number she ba ni ye ki number she ba ye ki ongbo ba to latin ye ki number she ba kam dun bo te den chu thamje de de ne suksu wa sang ne di mares den des ne da 당보 되다 컴비 에와치 딩데 갑들 수제 당 수제 마임바 강강 레스나 단 수제 임바 딘데 딘데레 수제 마임바 딘저 딘저 레스는 숨교레도
Paragraph 2.15 then reads, among the presentation of 18 elements, the ones that belong to the category of elements having physical form are the 10 elements of the 5 sense faculties and the 5 sense objects, as well as the one subcategory of the element of mental objects, which is imperceptible forms. The remaining ones are all without physical form. So the first discussion with regard to the 18 elements which we have classified now is whether they are form or not form. Whether they belong to form or not, whether they are suitable to be defined as form or not. So we have the 18 elements. That's the full classification of different elements. Looking at the topic of expertise, which is elements, and the classification are the 18 elements. Having concluded the classifications and speaking about each individually, now we look at how we can group them depending on certain characteristics. And the first characteristic that we look at is whether or which of the 18 elements belong to form and which do not, which are something that is suitable to be form as we defined form previously or not. And so the elements that have form are first, of course, the objects, the sense objects and the sense faculties. So the eye element, the ear element, the nose element, the tongue element, and the body element, as well as the respective objects. So the visible form element, the sound element, the scent element or smell element, then the taste element, and the touch element, the tangible objects. So these 10, the 5 sense faculties and the 5 sense objects, they all possess form, just as we have seen previously, because they actually come into being based on the 4 great elements, the causal elements. So they are made up from the smallest indivisible particles, and therefore they are actual form. And on top of that, on top of these 10 objects, the objects and the faculties that possess form, then we also have to add some part of the mental objects to the category or to having form. So not all parts of the mental objects, not all mental objects possess form, but some of, or partially they do, some of them do. And this is to say that in the Abhidhamma Kosha, it is explained that from these mental objects, it is imperceptible form that is actually a form, something that is suitable to be form. And in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, where we're presented with 16 mental objects, then there we have 5 that belong to the category, belong to form, which we saw as the 5 types of form that are mental objects when we were discussing form. So the 11th of the resultant forms was referring to 5 types of form that are mental objects, so deduced form, spatial form, and so on. And so according to the Kosha, imperceptible form is suitable to be form and belongs to the category of form, but not the other 6 mental objects. And according to the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, it's the 5 types of form that are mental objects that belong, like that are form, that are suitable to be defined as form, but not the other 11 mental objects. So what doesn't fall into the what doesn't have form are then the 7 aspects that are consciousness. So the sense consciousnesses, the mental faculty, and the mind consciousness. These do not have form. And then the other parts of the mental objects that we have seen, they're not form either. So this then refers to the in the Abhidhamma Kosha, all the mental objects but imperceptible form, so sensation, perception, formation, the 2 types of cessation and space, they are all not form. And in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, it refers also to the 11 types of mental objects, but the 5 types of form that are mental objects. So we have seen that perception, sensation, perception, and formation are not form. When we discussed it, we said that these mental states, they're not matter, they're not form. And within the mental states, then we saw sensation and perception extra, and then in formation we saw the entire presentation of concurrent formations and non-concurrent formations. We saw the 51 mental states and then the 24 non-concurrent formations. And all of that was described as not being form, right? Not being matter. So in short, it's the 10 things that have form, like the objects and the faculties, they all possess form, the sense objects and the sense faculties. And then we have a part of the mental objects. Like for the Kosha, it's the imperceptible form. For the Samuccaya, it's the 5 types of form that are mental objects that have form, and everything else does not have form.
Nibate tene meglamdu tendo yobane sukamchiku lama tendo metos tade kamchopjegu nangne tene migi 통규 yobade 가서 여래 안에 미기 통해 매바데 가서 여래스는 때데네스 된다라라 안에 니바데가 된다 니바데를 레벨 딜라 미글람도 통해 여바데 네 수감지고 스디가라 된가에 난 센터줄 수 센저와 단다 수기 감센 수기 감 트라이 감티 감다리가라 수기 감 내지마 원 딘데 지고 레송아레 데 수감지고데 믹시기 요도 줘봐 인스 락마데 텐도 메도스 테네 미 통투기 마레스마라 다딜라양 도스 똑바로 데다 지 가리리 베레스나 디 최기 개체 바이 속 난라 벤나 umbarkabyo 비속 생제와 온디데 데 가나스나 가상고마 야강라 아니 단다 속 되는 거 있는 속 쉐비 갑텔라 지 입기 소당 카톡기 속당 쓰네 근데 샤니 저기 갑라 데 넘버 까이비 속당 밀람게 갑라 통대위기 속된 조당 안에 멜롱낭라 통샤교 숭년 된 조당 다 어딘저 망보지 단다데 인교데 최감낭라 도와 되는 넘버 까이비 속승이 되도와 다 된조데 다 오나 단다 두루 미글람도 텐도 여바 속데 예남스 좋아 다 어디네 도과시 립겨래 데 미글람도 텐도 주르게 속데 예남스 다 딜라양 다지 삼로다지 망보시 땅 나나데 갈레 하고 교사래 강다라 지당 송당나 단나데 미글람도 텐도 여바데네 소감 직부스 라만남 텐도 메바오스 네, 다 가상데 넘버까지 속대 미글람도 통도 여바 갑라 간데스네 뭐네 코 미글람도 통도 여바 샤바당 디네 코 최기 깨치바이 속 나라 샤위 갑라 간데스네 최기 깨치바이 속라 샤임바 다텐조데 도당데 양주 셰나 데네 드로토스 칼레카기 마라 셰양 최기 깨치바이 속 텐조 양데 미기 통계 여사레 라우지르와 베난 다완 추나라 다베 숭년데 아니 밀람 난게 미샤교 된저 당 되네 바르낭 짜슴보 된조데 된조데 다 밀람도 된도 메와텔라 레도와 안 된조 콜라 삼로지 양 도단 심죽도 난 거래 밀람도 된도 여바데 소감직부 되인 슬라마 된조 된도 메바인 송자래 니바치 아니 디체라 양 숨바라 나 펜춘 톡바단 제바직 당 안에 톡바 메바생데 가인데 인스네 송아래 다 감쪽게 보나네 톡렉 여바된저 감 강강데레 톡렉 메바데 감 강강데레스네 된존 디 돈다데라 펜춘 톡바단 제바네니 왕나 요룽아데 수진 주데 인스 다 된저 톡레 쪽제 나신 톡에 여바라 쪽제 당 대당 단도 잘라든 좀 이제 토에 여바데 수수래라나 담배나 왕보시대가 왕보가 봐 미기 왕보네 안에 뢰주 왕보감 나 어딘저다 둘 차랍 둘세 되네 숭화 둘 차랍 망보 속속 수좀네 수여샤고 임발라됐네 다든저 톡제래도 와 근데다 안에 유룽아선 소 센다 감시비 갈라 수기 감 안에 트라이 감 디 감 되나 레이 감 리제 감 스네다 감 나나보라 다이단다데 왕보시비 갈라 유룽아스나라 고이밍라 어딘저 딘저 나보데 인세 왕보가다 유룽아보데데 안에 톡레게 바데 예세 톡레 인스 수첸 줄 레스 데네 락마 다감 감쪽기보 나네 데네 락마 다 감탁마 된저 여러분 된저 마인바기 감탁마 된저니 탐제 아니 토바 메바인스 다 감탁마 대양 망보지 여라 단들은 되겐 차사를 망보실라 되나
The second classification is then, or the second way of grouping the 18 elements is then in regard to whether they're visible or not. So that's the second way we look at them and classify them. Which elements are visible and which elements are not visible? And so here it says the element that can be demonstrated in the visual field is only the element of visual form. The remaining ones cannot be demonstrated. So only visible form, the visible form element can be seen, can be demonstrated in the visual field. So it's the only visible thing. It's visible form. The other so the other sense objects that we saw, sound, smell, and so on, they cannot be seen Also, they're not visible. Really, the only the only one of the 18 elements that is visible form, because the rest cannot be seen, cannot be apprehended through the eye faculty, cannot be seen by the eye. Now, when we talked about the 5 types of form that are mental objects, there were spatial forms and included in there, which we also saw in the discussion of visible form. We saw that visible form is classified as colors and shapes, and so and in that presentation we also saw spatial forms, for example. And so do we need to know how do we need to understand this now? Is it something visible or not visible? And there we have to go back to the presentation as we have seen it before. How did we say, does it belong to visible form? Is it something that we can actually point out? It's actually something that is actually seen or not? And so we have to go back to that presentation, and we said that really in its essence it belongs to the object of the mind, the mental objects, rather than to the to actual visible form. And so we need to be very clear about how we defined it. How did we put it in visible form? What aspect of it were we demonstrating there, and how did we explain it, this spatial form and all these different examples of the empty space between two things, reflections, the reflection of the moon in water, or the reflection of a person in a mirror. How did we explain all of these in terms of actual visible form or mental objects? And then if we look back at that discussion, then we won't be confused about the fact that they belong to mental objects and are not directly to be pointed out as visible forms here. So in that way, then only visible form is presented as being visible. All the other elements, the other sense elements, all the sense faculty elements, and also the consciousness elements, they are not something that can be demonstrated as form. Then the next classification is with regard to whether something is obstructive or not. So which of the elements are obstructive and which are not? Paragraph 2.17 reads, the mutually obstructive elements are the 10 having physical form, the 5 sense faculties, and the 5 sense objects. The remaining ones are not obstructive. So which of the elements are mutually obstructive? Which ones are obstructive? Which ones can be touched, or which ones can obstruct something physically? So that refers to the sense objects and the sense faculties. Only these 10, altogether 10, they are obstructive because they are made up from the smallest indivisible particles. So they are of the nature of being obstructive because they possess the substance of particles, many particles coming together, making up coarse matter, which then appears at all sorts of stuff, like the table and the door and the cup and all of these obstructive things. So it's the being made up of accumulation of particles. The sense objects and the sense faculties are actual matter that is obstructive. And so when we talked about the aggregates, we called those the sense objects and the sense faculties. Here now we enumerate them as the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the eye element, the ear element, the nose element, the tongue element, and the body element, as well as the visible form element, the sound element, the smell element, the taste element, and the touch element or tangible object element. And so all of these are obstructive, while the rest are not obstructive. And if I would now enumerate them all separately again, that would take too long. So the rest of the 18 elements are not obstructive.
네, 시와데 아니 시바 상메 니캄 좁게보 낭네 상메 임바 가수여 상체 임바 가수여 따티도 데라 아니 상메네 상메 임바 데네 컨데인스나 캄타마 예당 단다 왕보 지위가라 얘기 왕보 나야 되라 시에바 지위가라 캄타마데 얘기 시에바생 아니 속다 티로렉자 최스리가라 타마데 최이 캄스 어디 숨데 타마숨 캄타마숨 랑랑소소네 데센 타마숨보데 숨보 네 타마 예당 얘기 캄당 얘기 왕보 캄당 얘기 시에베 캄당 최지 캄데스 캄기 semjung lamden do tokpa dang duma chen nam ani sangme yindas den nam ma tokpi kham lakma chönga ba nam nyomong ki wi munsum ji chu yin be chena sakche so sen ta tamang la sangme shuna kangla mi nyomong ge su merung wa kangla mi nyomong phele am shi do chi ge na sakche kangla mi nyomong ba mi ge ba nyamong jesu mirungwa이나 상메스 네 근데 인송아래 다들 종아 주로 좁된 좁게 해도와 다 얘기 감당 얘기 세배 감당 최기 감나라 여긴 심중여로 와 최기 감나라 심중 단다 디지 초로와 당 두시에 당 두제 세네단다 초감나라 여바 초감 에와 나다 에와 둔두 샤나라도 초감 에와 주루도 샤나인다도와 다 간다란디 딘조 여데와 디 갑라스 데네 초감 디 갑라다 심중 딘조 세데네 얘기 감다 얘기 셰바다 초감기 심중 딘조 다 람딘도 똑바 람딘도 똑바 데네 통람바 팍팍이 줄라 여비 얘기 감 얘기 셰바 초감 남기 심중 단다 통람기 운동기 네 공도라 임박이 대 심중 된조 남딘도 똑바 된조데 두마체 레스 디마토비 아니 다 디마토비 아니 현 된조 지 가르스나다 sakche res mole ta didang chi ani 단다 얘기 감당 얘기 셰바 당 최감니 되라 디네 sakche 당 사메니 지괴도 네 sakche 인견 여라 사메 인견 여스 다 람딘도 셈중 람딘도 똑바데 사메 레스 얘기 홍보 얘기 감 얘기 셰바 최게 감 셈중 된조 통람 곰람 팍팍이 줄라 여바 된조데 네 상메레스 양 지당기 수수기오기 줄라 여비 예대당 얘기 셰바 초감 된조데 양 아니 상제레스 양 딜라딘데 샤고도 상제 임바당 상메 임바 아 딘데레스 데 두마제 남 된조 나 두마제 페나 제 도데베 진나페나 제라마 로소라 소소 타고 타밍 남카스 디 투마체 숨 샤임바 테네 셈자마라 소바게 디 강라 도다 디시니 생제 직님네 레스네 양 샤와라 투마체 시 창송아 안디 땡도라 양 몬바 군디고 로소라 아네 게 메게 롱마땡기 아네 디시니 숨 generated name the capdela shiga nga tu dun tu she me ba tene yes ati jo tuma che ke thamba yo ba on di tuma che ke bo den nam ma do bi lamdin do dog bi yi dan yi gi she ba dan chue gi kam sim jung lamdin do dog ba den so dang tuma che ke den zo de sang me res di maim ba ge tene ta kam thak ma den zo 감탕마 된조 당 되네 얘기 셰바 이 최감 되네 수수기 규라요베 된도 차든조 탐제 되네 남 녀몽기위 문숨지 주의리 임비치를 쓴다네 강남 믹나 녀몽기와 나 상제 임바 된조라 베나 붐바 다울라 믹나 너나 베나 붐바 야보이 통나 붐바델라 셈 가워르게 붐바 메제버 통나 셈 마가워르게 라소마 된데게 다나제 탁마된도 탐제라 되네 강남민네 녀몽바 펠레와르 제외 지기요는 상제 강남민네 녀몽바 펠레 메지베는 상메스 다워 되는 샤버레스 말도
The next discussion is then asking which of the 18 elements are defiled and which are undefiled. So when we speak about defiled and undefiled, then defiled or defiling phenomena refers to those that generate afflictive emotions, or that have the potential to generate afflictive emotions and increase afflictive emotions when focused upon, while undefiled phenomena do not have that potential. They do not generate or increase afflictive emotions. So which then of the elements are defiled and which are undefiled? The undefiling elements are the three last elements: the mind element, the mind consciousness element, and the mental states of the element of mental objects belonging to the true paths, in addition to the unconditioned things. So undefiled elements are then the aspects of the last three elements: the mind faculty element, the mental object element, and the mind consciousness element. Those and everything, those have aspects or can be classified as undefiled objects as those as they pertain to beings on the path of seeing or higher, or as they pertain to the realization of the truth of the path. So we spoke about the mind faculty, the mind consciousness, and the mental objects, and the mental objects also contained perception, formation, and sensation. So the three mental states grouped together, the three aggregates that are mental states. And so when they pertain to, when they relate to the mind stream of a noble being, so on the path of seeing, on the path of cultivation, and the path of no more learning, then those are undefiled, undefiling. But in the mind stream of ordinary sentient beings, they are defiling or defiled phenomena. So these three last elements, the mind faculty element, the mental object element, and the mind consciousness element, they are undefiled in the mind streams of noble beings from the path of seeing onwards, or with the realization of the truth of the path, but they're defiled in the context of ordinary sentient beings, in the mind streams of ordinary sentient beings. And that also then includes the undefiled, the unconditioned phenomena, which we saw according to the Abhidhamma Kosha to be the three types of unconditioned things: cessation, analytical cessation, non-analytical cessation, and space. And the unconditioned phenomena in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya being on top of the three mentioned in the Abhidhamma Kosha, also adding the three kinds of suchness, so the suchness of virtue, of non-virtue, and the neutral, and the two types of serenity, the serenity of non-perception and the serenity of cessation, making 8 unconditioned things. So these unconditioned things, they're also undefiled or undefiling. So the conditioned phenomena of the mind faculty, mental object, and mind consciousness in the mind stream of noble beings from the path of seeing onwards, or from having realized the truth of the path onwards, or in the realization of the truth of the path, as well as the unconditioned phenomena, the unconditioned things, that's all undefiled, while the rest is defiling. So the all elements as they pertain to ordinary sentient beings are defiling. So the mind faculty element, the mental object element, and the mind consciousness as well, as they belong to an ordinary sentient being, they are then defiling, including also the sensation, perception, and formation. And how do we understand it? We have to understand that defiling really refers to to everything that, when focused upon, where afflictive emotions can arise. So if something is focused upon and it bears the potential for afflictive emotions to increase or to be generated, then this is a defiling phenomena. And so then we can see that the form element, for example, is defiling because afflictive emotions can arise based on the apprehension of the object. So when we have a vase in front of it, we can either think of it as ugly or beautiful, and accordingly we will develop aversion or attachment to that vase. And so this is the way that all these elements can give rise to afflictions that are defiled or defiling, apart from the ones that we mentioned previously.
네, 감 접제보대 안에 도감 수강 수매 감라 가서 열에스네 딘데스네 삼나 디다 나바데라 도감나 감 탐제여스 감 접제보 탐제 뇌비 감라 감 접제보 탐제여스 송하르도 네 수감나 디로당 안에 나제 남시제 감마도 신 줍시여스 다 줍시 강라 나 제스는 주시 정아 주룩치 아니 디로스 접든 접게스 다디 시디 마도베 신 줍시도 여스 수마레도 수감나 안에 디당 로니에데라 이제 신차 뽕톱나 아니 수감기 감라 깨투기요래 수감나 깨와라 자와라 지심 미심 라소발라 차과방고 로 심미심 라소발라 차과 당 달고네 되네 수감나 깨투기요래 디인도 아니 수감나 깨와 된절라 지당 로니에데 빵심베체나 디 요마레스 디 메인도 갑라 아니 지마 지델라 아니 셰켄게 나이 남셰세 나이 남셰게 감생데 요마레 다나신 로이 감델라 아니 용겐게 제 남셰게 감생데 다티 요마레스 디인디 아니 수감라 아니 감 주시마다 요마레스 다티인디 수감나 지당 로딘족라 당 아니 나단체 남시 원고 다치 셰바 된조 매나 오나 아니 나 년초 년초 나당 젤레 된조 요 말에서는 랍나다 수감길 하 된조라 나다 젤레들 요래 선송하래다 요 고에 금생데 간신은 제제 치도라 인송하래야 나 매송나 빼 동바 제오 요 말에서네 젤레 매송나양 야오민 대인도 갑라테네 제제 치도라 요였습니다. 배전한데 숨여라. 제제 치도라 양 왕보대 요래스 왕보 제제 치도라 요래스 줍시 요스. 네 숙메나 다 숙메비 감다드네 감 좁게보 된존 낭네 아니 감 타마 숨게 차시 요도 선송하래 차시 요도스나 카시 감 타마숨 얘기 감 얘기 남시기 감 최기 감 디숨보되게 차시에서 되가나 카시지 요 송하네 용조 요 송한 말에 카시지 요 베나 안에 카시지 요 송하래도와 나서
Next comes then the question of how many elements are present or experienced in the different realms. So do they all appear in the desire realm, form realm, or formless realm? In the desire realm, all the 18 elements are present. In the form realms, there are 14 elements, excluding the elements of odor and taste, and of the nose and tongue consciousnesses. In the formless realm, there are the defiling aspects of the last 3 elements. So, how many of the elements are present in the desire realm? In the desire realm, all of them are present. So, the full spectrum of 18 elements are present in the desire realm. In the form realm, though, there are only 14 elements present, excluding taste or odor or smell and taste, as well as the nose consciousness and the tongue consciousness. So in order to be reborn in the form realm, one needs to be able to abandon one's desire for taste and smell. And so since there's no attachment to form or smell, then these elements are not present in the form realm. So there are no taste or smell elements, and also because there's no attachment, no desire to these objects anymore, then also no cognition, no sense consciousness of the nose or tongue will arise. And that's how we then count the rest of the elements being present. We have 14, so 18 minus 4. Now someone might ask, why then are there why are these 14 and not only 12? Like, if there's no attachment to the to smell and taste, then why are there the tongue faculty and the nose faculty? And this is actually due to beauty, for beauty reasons. So if there were no nose and no tongue, then these gods in the form realm wouldn't look good. And so since that's necessary, then the faculties are actually present, even though there are no objects and no consciousnesses of sound and of smell and taste. So yeah, so the ear, the nose and the tongue faculties, or the nose and the tongue elements, are present because for beauty reasons. And that's my question for attendance today. Why are they present? And then in this way we have 14 elements in the form realm, and in the formless realm actually we have only aspects of the 3 last elements. So that's then again the mind element, or the mind faculty element, the mental objects, and the mind consciousness element. Some aspects of them, not all of them, but some are present in the formless realm. Okay, let's stop here for today.
Jambal Boy Jedara Kemba Da Kundo Sambyo Deya Tishen De Da Kunje Jesu Da Lonje Kewa De Da Tamje Rabdo Ngoyendu Sum Shebe Nyalwa Tamje Je Ngowa Kangla Chodo Ngapade Dage kebe tsawa de gun yang sangbo chechir rabdo ngobara je sunam de tamje seba nye topne nyebe chanam pamje kenga na che balav chuba yi sebe chole drowa Jolowara shong kewa de kewo kun sonam yeshe chozo shi sonam yeshe lejong wa tamba kunye tombara sho lo chuso jowara chinje labdo son chu lamdo jowara chinje labdo nam chulwa salwara chinje labdo son Chulupa yeshe so charwara chenje lamdo sono. Chelajiang.
Chelajiang.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Inka, I have a question.
Yes.
Just very briefly. I think I read in the reading that the tongue and nose faculty are present for beauty and elocution.
What? What was the second word?
Elocution. I think that's like rhetorics, or like speaking fancily or something, if I'm not wrong.
Like that would like be the tongue. Like you need the tongue for speaking. And they do communicate because they have sound, right, in the form realm. So
yeah, right.
Lamala just didn't mention it now. So he said it's necessary to have a tongue. And that would be, I mean, if I close my mouth, you don't see my tongue. So it's not ugly if I don't have one, but it's still necessary to have one. And I guess that's the explanation.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Samir, we got a question. Why? Why do we why do formless have formless beings in the form realm, a nose and a tongue?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bill was asking at the beginning of class about this question, and I don't have it right in front of me right now, right? But so the text itself says the first 10 come from the Abhidhamma Kosha, and the second set of 14 comes from the Samuccaya in addition to those. Why it's not said they come all from the Samuccaya is because the Samuccaya actually only has 23. It doesn't list dispossession.
So that's what I thought. I just wanted to check. But it was okay. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I distracted you just before you were about to go to work. I don't know.
I have the Manjushri prayer to collect myself.
Okay.
Yes. So that's always a good time to ask something
Okay.
when we're waiting, or right after class if it's something I can answer you from the top of my head. Or we stay a little bit longer to give you that opportunity. Okay.
So yeah.
You have a lot of noise. Now it's better. Yes.
And now?
It always comes and then it goes away again. Okay. Yeah, now it's gone.
And now?
Now it's good.
And you told us that you will, because I got lost with this datus, really. I got lost, this listing, this different categorization. It's a nightmare for me, sorry to say.
Yeah. I already have a chart or a list of what is being discussed, and then we will go over it.
On Friday? Will we go in there?
Well, hopefully, definitely next week, because we still have a lot to talk about from last week.
I see.
But if we have time, sure. I will give you. I can post a list of classifications, like what we're looking at, below the video in the recording. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? So many people are still here. Okay, I guess not, and then I'll also stop. See you.